Today we want to cover two important additional aspects concerning ASP.NET Core. One is configuration and one is configuration management and one is logging. These two concepts of ASP.NET Core we'll take a closer look at. But I would like to spend the first, half an hour or so to quickly recap some concepts of ASP.NET Core by building a very short example together. I will talk a little bit about more in-depth concepts of ASP.NET Core, and then we will use this example to add some configuration management and logging and so on. So I would ask you to follow along. So please start your Visual Studio 2019. If you have it, you should have it by now. And we will start with a brand new project. So click on Create New Project. And then please select ASP.NET Core application, this one. Make sure, give it a name. Let's call it Simple Spell Checker. Okay, sounds good. Simple spell checker. Let's build a simple spell checker. We are going to build a simple web API because we are in the mobile computing course and there we build APIs for later mobile frontends. So please select the API project template and make sure that you use the latest version of ASP.NET Core 3. Maybe you have already heard it. ASP.NET Core 3 is final. Meanwhile, it's no longer preview. So if you don't have it already in the final version, you can start your Visual Studio installer, not now, but maybe after the lesson if you happen to not have done it. And this Visual Studio installer will keep your Visual Studio up to date and will install the latest version and will remove the preview bits from your machine. On the right-hand side, you can choose whether you want to have an encrypted connection or not. I don't care whether you prefer HTTPS or HTTP. We don't need it for this exercise, so I will remove the check, but it's up to you whether you want to keep it. And create it. Now let me quickly discuss what we are going to build together. As the name suggests, it will be a very simple spell checker. But it's fine for us. We will have a dictionary. You don't need to type that, it's just as an idea. The dictionary is essentially a file. And this file will contain words, known words of the English language. The, fox, jumps, dog, lazy, for instance. And the second thing that we will have is we will get from the user a text containing English words. For instance, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. I don't know if you know the sentence. It's a famous sentence, a famous test sentence that many people use. Why? Because it contains all letters of the English alphabet. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. Now, our algorithm should do the following. It should take a look at each of these words and check whether the word is in our dictionary. So if I zoom in a little bit, we will see, do we have the in the dictionary? Yes. So it's not a wrong word, everything is fine. Do we have quick in the dictionary? No, we will return that to the user as a possibly misspelled word. Do we have brown? No, we have to return it. Do we have fox? Yes. Can ignore it. Do we have jumps? Yes, we ignore it. Do we have over? No, we have to return it. Do we have the? Yes, we have it. We can ignore it. Do we have lazy? Yes. Do we have dog? Yes. So in this case, we will return, dear user, please check quick, brown, and over because these are words that we don't know. It's simple, I know. We don't do word stemming, we just do one language, we ignore special characters like dots and comma and so on, but that's not the point, okay? It's a simple algorithm and good for our example. Good? Good. So first, let's add our dictionary. It should be a file. You can easily add a file to a C# Visual Studio solution. Just press right-click on the project, add new item. Here you find it. And then we can tell Visual Studio that we would like to add a text file. Let's call it dictionary.txt. And here we have our dictionary. And please add the specified words, this one. Do you have added the dictionary.txt to your project? Good. In order to make it run, we have a small problem that we have to fix. Let me demonstrate what I mean. If I build my solution, let's wait until Visual Studio says it successfully compiled my solution. Okay. If I go into the File Explorer and take a look at the result, bin, debug, netcorep3, then you will see that we have our exe, simple spell check exe. We can start that, but do you see the dictionary.txt anywhere here? No, of course not. Because what Visual Studio does, if you add a text file or any kind of file that he doesn't know what he should do with it, it ignores it. So right-click on dictionary.txt, properties, and then you can specify what to do with the file. We can say build action, hey, the file doesn't contain any source code, so it doesn't make sense to compile it. But here we have a very important settings. Copy to output directory. Do not copy. This is the default. And let's change that to copy if newer. If you do that, the text file will be automatically copied together with your application. So if you rebuild your app and you recheck in the Explorer, then you will recognize dictionary.txt in the target folder. See that one? So whenever you want to deploy something together with your app, just change the copy to output directory setting and you are fine. Technically, this is a setting in the csproj file. So if I go to the csproj file, you will see that there is an additional XML area here, an element item group, update dictionary txt copy to output directory, and that tells Visual Studio that you would like to copy this file. Good? The same is true for any kind of files that you want to copy together with your app. Maybe some image files or whatever configuration files are set like that. Good. Now we have our dictionary. The dictionary, in the other class, I had the problem that the students didn't have this setting. Can you please tell me whether you have this CRLF setting here on the right-hand corner? You have it? Okay, I have no idea why some people didn't have it. If you have it, please change from CRLF to LF. Do you know what CR, character return, and LF, line feed is? I don't have it. Yes? You don't have it? So ignore it, what I tell you. So character return, line feed, and line feed, the difference is that one time it writes two characters, character return and line feed, and the other time it just writes the line feed. It's from the old ancient times when there were typewriters where you manually had to character return and line feed, but yeah, today we still struggle with. Yep.
I think it's a difference between the preview version and the normal version.
Maybe the preview version already has it and the final release doesn't have it, but don't worry, it's an interesting setting. Maybe it will come. It doesn't make any big difference. Good. Now we have the dictionary. Now we can care about the controller. Do we have to change something in Program CS? No, not now. Something in Startup CS? No, not now. Weather forecast is a generated file. We can ignore it. We can delete it because we don't need it for our code. Just remove it. And then we go to the controllers area. In the controllers area, we would like to change first the name of the controller. I suggest that you do the following. You go to the CS file and just press F2 for renaming and change weather forecast controller to simple spell check controller. Or let's call it just spell check controller, okay? If you rename the file, please note Visual Studio will automatically recognize that the file contains a class with the same name, and it suggests that you immediately also rename the class. That is fine. We gladly accept that. And you will immediately see that Visual Studio will rename the class too, not just the name of the file. Good? Now we can remove a bunch of generated code, everything until the HTTP GET, and everything inside the method is just generated demo code from Visual Studio. We don't need it. This is how your sample should look like. Have it? Good. Now let's first think about how we will model our API. I think we have, which HTTP method would you suggest? Should we do, for this problem, should we do post, put, patch, delete, and or get? I think there are two meaningful options that we have. Which one?
Could use get with a query parameter.
Get with a query parameter. That would look something like this. Localhost 5000, spell checker, question mark, sentence equals to, and this stuff. That is one option. Any other options? Delete doesn't make sense. Patch makes sense. Put, it's not an update. So what's remaining? Post. That would be the second option. We could do something like this, spell checker, but this time not a get, but this time we could say post, and we could say, hey, send the sentence in the HTTP body. Get the idea? So for my demo here, I would prefer the post version, but the get version is perfectly fine too. The get version, in fact, has a big advantage if you want to try something. You can just start it in Chrome, in any kind of web browser, because you can just copy this URL and it will just work. For the second option, post, you need an additional tool. You need something like Postman or REST client or Insomnia in order to do the HTTP post. Well, I want you to try these tools, so therefore I decide to go with post. Good? So please change HTTP get to HTTP post. Let's call the method, I don't know, spell check, something like this. What will we get as an input parameter? Yeah?
A sentence.
A sentence of type string. Exactly. So we say from body string sentence. Sentence. Good. By the way, in the get version, so in this version here, what would we have to change? We would have to change from body to from query. Well, just a quick recap. Now, what will be the result type of our spell check method? We want to return a list of words that we don't know and understand.
Enumerable string.
I agree. Enumerable of string, that means a list of strings. Not just a list, it can also be an array, just a collection of strings. This is what we return here. Good? Do you have any additional options that we could use as a return type here? An IAction result, you're right. IAction result. So now what's the difference? If we use an IEnumerable of string compared to an IAction result or an action result of T. The IEnumerable of string means that we always return a list of strings and HTTP status code 200. Always. We cannot return a bad request error or a not found status code. That's simply not possible if we have a return type I enumerable. But if we change to I action result or to action result of, t, something of string array, for instance, we could do that too, then we can control which HTTP result we return, because then we can say return OK or return bad request or return not found or whatever. So if we have the situation that we would like to be in control and in charge of the HTTP status code, use IAsync result. If you always return HTTP 200, then you can easily use the original data type. And this is what we are going to try, because in the homework and in my slides, you always see this I action result. But today I would like to show you that it works perfectly fine with I enumerable 2. So that will always return an HTTP 200 status code with the proper result. Good. Now what do you have to do? Let's quickly sketch some steps that we have to do. First, I will do it. First, we have to read the dictionary from file. This will be your first step. Then we have to split dictionary into known words, line by line. So whenever we find a line feed, we say this is a new word. Please keep in mind the dictionary looked like that. Every line contains a new known word. What is the next thing that we have to do? Is we have to take our sentence and split the sentence into words separated by blank. Remember, this was the sentence, and in our simple example, our words are separated with blanks. In our simple example, we will not care about special characters like dot and comma, and we will not do word stemming. Runs become run, and quick become quickly, might become quick or something like this. We will not do that. Simply split the sentence into words using blanks. Then, for each word, check if it is contained in our dictionary. If not, return it. If it is, ignore it. You know, I typically really do that. If I have to come up with a more complex algorithm, I typically sit down and write an outline like that, just like if you write a diploma thesis or any other kind of paper, then you first come up with a table of contents. And this is kind of table of contents of my algorithm. So now I have an idea what I want to do step by step. And now I can fill in the blanks. Right? Good. So, let's try together. Read dictionary from file. There is a class which is called file, and this class is in the system.io namespace. You can put it like that. System.io.file, and it happens to have a method which is called read all text async. It takes the file path, well, that's simple, dictionary.txt, we created this file together. This will give us the content of the entire file. Simple, isn't it? However, if we take a closer look here, then you will see that the return type is a task of string, and it is here marked as awaitable. Visual Studio is really polite to us because it tells us already what we have to do in order to get to the final result. In the next few weeks in the C# course, not in this mobile computing course, but in the C# course, we will dive much deeper into async await and tasks and so on. But currently we just trust Visual Studio, and Visual Studio has told us that we should just put an await statement on the left-hand side, kind of You know that saying from me. It's kind of Harry Potter programming. Just put the await there, little fairy dust, and everything works. Yeah. Not right, not quite completely, because we have await, but we are still missing something if we want to use await in a C# method. Do you know it?
We need a variable where received.
We can do that. You are absolutely right. Var dictionary content. That's true. But something additional is missing. Yeah. Async is missing. Exactly. We have to mark the method as async. See that one? And we still have a problem. Spell check, as you can see it here, does still not work. It tells us, Rainer, that doesn't work. You have to return a task of t. That's the third step that you have to remember. Task of. So, very simple cooking recipe if you want. If you have an async method, add async to the declaration of the function, make the return type task of something, and put await in front of all async method calls. As I told you, in the next few weeks we will dive much deeper into async, await, and task and so on. But currently, these are the 3 steps that you have to do. Async, await, task. Done. Theoretically, and please don't do that in real world, theoretically you could have also called read all text, because read all text will immediately return the string and not a task of thing. But please don't do that. That will ruin the performance of your web application. Your web application will perform poorly. It will not scale good. So whenever you do a web API development, always, if you have the option, always choose the async option of the methods. Never use the synchronous options. Again, we will go in much more details in the C# course in the upcoming weeks. Currently, just remember this rule, okay? Good. Now we have the dictionary content. We have fulfilled our first challenge. Next challenge. Split dictionary into known words. Luckily, there is a ready-made function which can split a string. We can do it like that. We can say dictionary content dot split, and it takes characters which are separators, and in our case, it's \n. This will give us each line in a separate array element. So what we get back is an array of string where we get every line in a separate array element. So var dictionary words. By the way, quick recap concerning C#. What does this var mean here?
It defines the type of dictionary words at runtime.
No, that's the big misunderstanding. You said var let C# define the type at runtime. No, that is not correct. The thing that you mixed up here is dynamic. Dynamic would do exactly what you just told us, but var does something else. Var takes a look at the right-hand side, so it looks at the expression here on the right-hand side of the equal sign. It finds out that split returns a string array and therefore automatically decides that dictionary words is a string array. So in TypeScript last year, I told you that I never ever want to see var in TypeScript. I want you to write let or const. That is not true in C#. In C#, var is perfectly fine. If you dislike var, it's perfectly fine if you just write string array here. If you want to write it because you think that the code is then more easy to read, feel free to decide. I'm a big fan of var because I'm a lazy programmer, therefore I don't like to think more than I'm absolutely forced to think, and therefore why should I think about the type? C# will figure it out automatically. It's just my style. But there are other people who think that it might be useful to write the type here explicitly. Good. Now we have the dictionary words. Same is true for the sentence. Now this is kind of trivial. Copy this line up there, This will be the sentence, words, and this will be split with blanks. Oh, sorry, not dictionary content, of course, but sentence. This one. Good. Now we have all the words in the sentence and we have all the words in the file. What happens if I cannot change from carriage return line feed to line feed? What happens if we have carriage return line feed? Then we have a problem here, because then at the end of each dictionary word we have a carriage return character, \r. We have to get rid of that. Fortunately, this is not complicated, because we can simply say replace \r with an empty string. And please, whenever you have something like this, don't write it like that, but say string.empty. Just good coding style. Again, this removes carriage returns from the strings. You are familiar with that. I think I asked you, right? Carriage return, line feed. Good. Just to make sure, if it is inside the file, we remove it. Often you write things like that in this case, in this style. So if you have multiple methods which are called one after the other, then you often use this coding style where you put the methods here in a kind of row. You see that one? It depends. If the line becomes very, very long, it's considered good styling to add the method calls line by line. If the line is short, it's fine to keep it in one coding line. It depends. It's up to you whether you like it this way or that way. Now, for each word, we have to check whether it is contained in our dictionary. So I kind of gave you a hint of which kind of loop we should use in order to iterate over all of our words. For each. Exactly. For each var word in sentence words. Oops. Now we have to check whether it is contained in our dictionary. Again, I gave you a hint because there is a method which is called contains. So we can say if not dictionary words dot contains word, what do we do? If it isn't contained in the words. If not, return it. So in this case, we have to return the word because it is not known. How do we do that? Well, a simple way of doing that would be by setting up a helper variable. We could say var results equals to new list of string. This list of string, it will hold the resulting words. So we can easily add the word to the result list. Results.add, here it is, word. And at the end, we return results. Good? Fine. Now let me show you something. This is not absolutely necessary to remember, just I would like to show it to you. It's possible to shorten this algorithm to a great extent. Let me quickly show you how this is done. you could do the following. You could say, give me this sentence, split it up by blanks, and then filter all words where the word is not contained in the dictionary, and that is all you need because you can immediately return this guy. It's a one-liner. This is called ling. For 2 weeks ago when I was here, I think it was in the other class, I had a cover lesson where I did a deep dive into ling. It's not absolutely necessary to know all this stuff that I showed there, but it's kind of interesting if you are interested into programming languages and C#. I recorded the cover lesson in the other class, and it's available on the YouTube channel in this year's playlist. So if you are interested in learning more about how this where stuff works and why it is there and how its magic is really working behind the scenes, then take a look at this recording. It's not an absolute must, but if you are interested in this stuff, could be an interesting view. So I'm perfectly fine with the long algorithm here. It is a little bit less efficient, I know, but I'm happy with it. You know, it's the more obvious code, it's easier to read, and for beginners that's perfectly fine. But the other thing is possible. Good. What do you think? Bless you. Should we give it a try? Of course we should. Let's give it a try. I will switch from IIS Express to Simple Spell Checker because I don't want Internet Information Server. I just want a plain console app. And with that, we just run it. Spell check was the name. So it comes up in a second. Then we have to somehow do the HTTP post, right? So we need any kind of tooling, a program with which we can send an HTTP post. This is not possible in the browser. Any ideas from last year which tools we could use? Postman, for instance. The REST client in Visual Studio Code, Insomnia. Okay, you mentioned Postman, so let's give it a try with Postman. Open the window a little bit to let in fresh air. I have a pretty old version of Postman installed. Please ignore that. I've given a similar lecture in the other class, therefore I already have something here. Let me show you what I have here. I have an HTTP post to spell check. I specified that I would like to send a raw JSON request, and then I added the quotes here in order to make my sentence a valid JSON content. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. And if you give that a try, the server should answer with a meaningful request. Exactly, quick, brown, and over, response, not request. This is exactly what I expected. So let me show you again. Post, spell check, raw, JSON, and don't forget the quotes in order to make it a valid JSON. JSON strings needs quote. JSON strings need quotes. Does it work? Or does anybody need support? I will show you the code again so you can compare the code with your solution. Let's stop it, and here it is. Let's go into full screen mode. Here you have the code. So compare the code and let me know if you have any problems. Now that we have our simple post version, I just looked at the watch and I think we have 5 minutes left. I don't want to start with configuration management for this 5 minutes because then we have to somehow break right in the middle. So let's use this 5 minutes to just implement a second version of our spell checker, the get version, just so that we can remember what we would have to change in order to do the HTTP get. What are the differences? I will quickly show them to you, and it's just a repetition of what we already discussed. HTTP get would be the attribute on top of the method. The method signature would be pretty similar. I will call it spellcheck get, but I have to change the from body to a from query. Any suggestions how we could implement the spellcheck get now? Should I copy the code? Well, obviously not. That wouldn't be a good idea. So what could we do? Can I simply call the other method? Why not? Of course you can. You can say await, return await spell check sentence. Why not? It's perfectly fine. It's the same data, but this time we get it through an HTTP get. Understand it? No difference. If you would like to keep it shorter, if you have a method which just consists of a single return statement, you can write it a little bit differently. It's just syntactic sugar. There is no real functional difference. What you could do is you can say arrow indicator here, remove that one, remove that one, remove the return statement. See it? So you can write it somehow like this. This one, no return statement, no curly braces, just immediately here you add the implementation. Essentially, this is so short, you can even write it in a single line. You see it? Just a single line. If you prefer to have a long version with the return and the curly braces, I'm perfectly fine with that. It's internally, the compiler does exactly the same, so there is no real difference. It's just a matter of personal programming style, if you like that or not. I know people who love that, and I know people who dislike that. So, nothing special yet. So let's give it a try. Let's run this thing. And this time I have the big advantage that I don't need Postman in order to try my application. Because I can just go into Chrome. Oh, Chrome just came up. Here it is. And I say spell check question mark sentence equal to the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog, and let's go for it. And if everything is okay, yes it is, we will get a return quick brown over, and that's exactly what we expected. Please note, and don't be disturbed by that Chrome automatically replaces the blanks with a %20 character code. That's so-called URL encoding. Special characters like blanks are replaced with this %hex value stuff. It's done automatically. But do you see the difference? Or the advantage? If you have the get version, you can just try it in the browser. If you have the post version, you need to have something like Postman. But the code looks really similar. We call the original implementation here to here. We just change the attribute and this attribute. And then we are good. Okay? Nice. Please save what we have done here. We have now quarter of an hour break, and after the break we'll dive into configuration management and logging. Good. Good. Cover him. So with that, let's continue. Any questions that are open from the previous lesson? Good. So let's continue. The first thing that I would like to cover, let's quickly take a look at the slides, is ASP.NET configuration. What is configuration? Why is configuration important? In every program, or in nearly every non-trivial program, you have some settings which are not really code, they are more environment-specific settings. Something like this. Imagine the following situation. For our test environment, the very small dictionary with just a few words is perfectly fine. But in production, we could have a much larger environment, a much larger dictionary, for instance. And we would like to use a different file in each environment. Now, if we hard code a setting like that directly in the code, we have a problem, because on the production server, this might be a different file. I mean, this example is really trivial. It's very simple, and it's there to keep things simple. But in a real-world applications, you have many more settings like that. Think of, for instance, a database connection string. On your development laptop, you would maybe like to access a local database running on your local development machine. If you copy your code to a test environment, you would like to have the database connection string pointing to the test database. And in production, you want to have the database connection string pointing to the production database. And the rule is that the code must never change when going from dev to test to production. The code is always the same. However, the settings, they differ. And therefore, we have to extract settings like that into some configuration system where we can have config values for dev, config values for test, and config values for prod. ASP.NET supports all that. ASP.NET has a pretty powerful configuration system built in, and it's very easy to use. And I would like to show you the basic principles, and then I would like to show you some more elaborate solutions that you can use in real-world projects. Let's start with the simple stuff. The simple stuff is adding a config file, which in ASP.NET Core is called appsettings.json. If you created the project with the wizard at the beginning of this hour, then you already have an appsettings.json file. If you create the project from scratch and you happen to don't have an appsettings.json file, you can add this appsetting.json file using the add new item wizard. Just choose appsettings file and you will get an appsettings file like we've seen here. But we already have it in our application. Let's quickly open the appsettings.json file. The appsettings.json file contains some logging information, not relevant for us now. You can remove that one. And the allow hosts setting is just the setting that we would need if we put really this web application, for instance, into a cloud environment or into a production server. We also don't need this one. Essentially, it's an empty JSON file, and here we can add any kind of settings that we like. I give you an example. I can add dictionary file name, and then we just add dictionary.text. Get it? This setting is now not hard-coded in my C# code, but it's in a separate file. Now, if we build this program, please rebuild your application. And when we then take a look in the destination folder, then you will see that you have the exe, and you also have the appsettings.json file. So now we can change the settings in development, in test, in production by changing the values here in this file. We do not have to build a separate version of our executable code for dev, test, and prod. Understand that? So that's a very important rule, and maybe I might ask you in an oral exam whether that's okay. The rule is always keep code identical between dev, test, and prod. If you compile a certain version of your program and you put it in test, and in a test environment somebody tests it, then you absolutely must copy exactly that program to production. Many people make the mistake that they then go to Visual Studio, make a last-minute change some values, configuration settings, and so on, build the application, and without testing, they put it in production. And then very bad things happen. Because then it's very embarrassing because it worked in test and it doesn't work in prod and you messed it up. You don't want to be in this situation. Therefore, we extract all the settings and put them in this appsettings.json file. Maybe you already see that there is a second file, this one, it's called appsettings.development.json. What does that mean? If you open here the appsettings.json file with this small little arrow here, then you will see that we have a second configuration file, which is called appsettings.development.json. If we take a look in this file, it also contains some stuff. Logging, as I told you, is not relevant now. It's empty. And what this appsettings.development.json does, it's replacing some settings in the original file. So the rule is, this one is taken for test environments, for production environments, things like that. These settings can update some settings here with settings which are only relevant for your specific development environment, Visual Studio development laptop. Get the idea? You can do that. And by the way, if you want to understand how Visual Studio distinguishes it, it can be found here in the project settings. Under debug, you have an area where you can set environment variables. See that one? This is an environment variable, and here you set the environment variable. If Visual Studio, if ASP.NET Core detects that there is a variable which is called ASP.NET Core _ environment and its value is development, then the settings from this file are applied. Otherwise, it is ignored. Get it? It will not be relevant for your exam, because in your exam we will just use your local Visual Studio, so it doesn't make any difference. But for real-world projects, that distinction might make a difference. Now let's apply this knowledge. Let's go into our spell check controller, and the question is, how do we now remove this string? How do we access the setting in our appsettings.json file? And this is pretty simple. What you do is you add a constructor to your class. Small tip, I don't know if you know that, you can just type CTOR top, and then Visual Studio will auto-generate a constructor for you. Pretty convenient. And if you want to have access to ASP.NET Core's configuration system, all you need to do is you need to add a parameter of type iConfiguration. Let's call it config. Okay? This iConfiguration, a using is missing. Just use the light bulb here. See? This one. Just click on it. And Visual Studio will suggest that it adds a using statement, exactly what we want to have. Good? Can you remember from last year what we did in TypeScript when we wanted to make a variable available in the entire class? We simply had something like private, and that's not possible in C#. I'm very sorry. So this TypeScript feature is not available in C#. I would love to have it, but it's not there. So we have to manually save this config variable in a class member. So what I do, I can show you a trick in Visual Studio. You can say this.config equals config. Then Visual Studio will recognize, hey Rainer, there is no member variable called config. Then again, you can use the light bulb. The keyboard shortcut is Ctrl dot. Just press Ctrl dot and generate the field automatically. Saves you a little bit of typing. Got it? Good. Nice. And if we want to access the config settings, we do it in this way. Let me put the settings file on the right-hand side here. We can do it like that. var dict file name equals to config square brackets name of the configuration setting. So we take this setting and we just copy it here. That's it. And now the value of the configuration setting is copied into dict file name. You have code snippets, code samples in my slides. So for the exam and for the homework, just copy the code from there or take a look in the ASP.NET Core documentation. Now, what are the most important things to remember? Let's quickly recap that. First, store I configuration coming from the constructor. Second, use the indexer operator to get the configuration settings value. Now, we are not perfect yet. We are not perfect yet. If we want to improve a little bit, then I would like to, that has nothing to do with the config settings, but it is a very important feature of C# and Visual Studio. I would like to draw your interest to this one. This is a nice little helper from Visual Studio. Whenever you see these 4 dots, then Visual Studio has a tip for you. Visual Studio tells you, hey Rainer, your code will not break, but you didn't use a good coding practice here. Something is not perfect. It's kind of a small error here, so maybe you want to take a look at my tip. So let's take a look what Visual Studio suggests. You see, it suggests that we can make this field read-only. What does read-only mean? We can just follow this guideline and add the read-only modifier. Essentially what read-only means is that the value of config can only be changed inside the constructor. Nowhere else. After the constructor, the value is read-only. Therefore, best practice, if you have a member which is only written in the constructor, use read-only. And Visual Studio told you that. So my advice to you, whenever Visual Studio has these nice 4 dots, for instance in your homework or your exam, take a look at it. It might be a very useful tip that saves you a few points in your exam, for instance. So take a look at these tips. You have a question?
Should we change the...
Absolutely, absolutely. You mean that one? Thank you for pointing that out. You are absolutely right. Dict file name. Otherwise it wouldn't make any sense. Nice. So we got better here. Next one. Sometimes you have more complex settings. Imagine a real-world application where you have a lot of settings. Settings like this. Setting 1 is foo, and setting 2 is, I don't know, you don't need to write that down, it's just an example. And then we have I don't know, setting 3, and the setting 3 is 42, and so on and so on. Many settings. Then you can structure your settings into groups, because it's just JSON. So what you can do is you can say my important settings, and then you can create a sub-object here. You see that? And then you can move some of these settings into this sub-object, just to get a little bit of structure in your config files. Otherwise you have dozens and dozens and dozens of lines and you don't really see which config settings belong together. This is a better way of structuring. Now how would you reference this setting here? It would work like that. You would say my important settings colon setting 1. Understand it? This one here, this one here. This is how that works in ASP.NET Core. Just for your interest, in many cases we will just write rather simple applications in this course, so probably you will not come into a situation where you have to structure your config files like this. In many cases it's just enough to use that one, but now you know. There are even more elaborate solutions to access these settings files. You have the so-called options pattern and so on. We will not cover that because of time restrictions in this course, but in my slide deck you have the link to the documentation of ASP.NET Core. So if you are in your diploma thesis or in your final year project and you want to write really good code, maybe you read the documentation article to understand every details about the configuration system. Good? But we're still not at the end of the road. The configuration system has a bunch of additional tricks for you. Let me show you how that works. First, I will compile the application. And then I will go to my target directory, it's here. And then I will spin up a command shell. Good. Here you see we have our exe, we have our dictionary, and we have our app settings JSON. Now this should simply work. If I say simple spellchecker.exe, the web server will come up. Looks good. And now I can try it here. No, Do I still have it? No, let's try it here. Localhost 5000, and then we had what? Spell check. I think it was like that. Sentence equals to the quick brown fox. And we get a result. Good. Looks good. So it works. We can just start it here directly in the console. That works good. Now let's do something else. I will now rename the dictionary text to large dict.txt. So imagine we are now no longer on the development machine. We copied our executable on our big server, and there we want to use a big dictionary with thousands of words in it. And on the server, unfortunately, this file is not called dictionary.txt. It's called large dict.txt. So what could we do? If we just run the application like that, we will probably have a problem. Let's give it a try. Here, rerun it. Boom. Page is not working, and we get an exception. Of course, as you can see it here, could not find file. There is no dictionary.txt anymore. So, problem. With the dictionary, having the dictionary in the settings file, we could just edit app settings JSON and change dictionary.txt to large dict.txt. We could do that. That would be possible, but it's kind of complicated, right? Imagine that you would like to deploy your application automatically. You copy the whole application to the development server. And next day you have a new version of your application and you will copy the whole application onto the production server. I can guarantee you that you will forget one thing: changing the app settings JSON. You will overwrite it with your old settings and boom, it will not work anymore. It's not convenient. You know what I mean? Because of that, Visual Studio Core allows you to overwrite settings when calling the application. So what we can do is we can call the simple spell checker, and then if we take a look here at the settings file, here it is, we can say dictionary file name equals to large dict.txt. So we can override the settings from the settings file in the command line. Let's try it. Run it. Refresh it. Yoo-hoo! Works. So now we were overriding these settings in the command line. It's also possible to override the settings, for instance, in environment variables. That's also possible. So what you can do is on your production server, you can set an environment variable, and then you can copy your application on the production server over and over again, and you don't have to fear that something breaks because you override your settings file. This will not happen. Get it? Good. So environment variables and overriding. Last but not least, I would like to draw your attention to a certain problem that we don't have here, but you have it very often. Imagine you have something like this, DB connection string. And then I see many applications that work like this. They have the DB connection string with server equal to migrate server, and user equals to admin, and password equals to password123, something like this. What happens next? You will definitely take this file and check it into GitHub. Somebody else will see this, will copy the file, and if your database happens to run in the cloud, he will steal all your valuable data, all your credit card data, for instance. And that is not a good idea. So there is a super important rule. You absolutely have to remember this. This can be a lifesaver for many situations because there are bad people out there who exploit those things, definitely. Never ever store a security critical setting in a text file that is checked into your source control. Never, without any exceptions. Now, maybe some of you ask yourself, did I check in the credentials for accessing my virtual machine in the Amazon cloud into GitHub? That would be a bad thing, because people will read the setting from there, install the Bitcoin miner, and then they will mine Bitcoins on your charge. So never ever write a secret a connection string, an API key, a password, whatever, in a text file that you check in. You have multiple options. You can encrypt the file. Okay, if you really know what you are doing, if you selected the right encryption mechanism and you did not check in the decryption key, because then it doesn't make sense, then encryption is somewhat fine. Next one, you can simply not select the connection string here and specify the connection string for the database just as I showed you here when running the application at runtime or in an environment variable. That's also okay. What you can also do is you can just specify, for instance, something like this, localhost, and here you say, for instance, for a SQL server, integrated security equals true. That will use your Windows credentials when accessing SQL server. Now I don't have my valuable password in my config file. I need to sign in with my password or fingerprint or facial ID or whatever to my Windows computer, and then Windows will use my personal account when accessing the database. Get the idea? And if you are really professional and you would like to do professional development nowadays, you would probably use something like a vault and a Geldbörse, key vault. Maybe you know a password database that you use locally, something like KeyPass or so on. Do you use something like this? Yeah? Okay. Products like Key Vault, every vendor has its own product in this direction. This is the solution from Microsoft that I am pretty familiar with. Key Vault is a service in the cloud where a provider like Microsoft, they installed special hardware. It's special hardware with cryptography built in. This hardware is certified. I think it's a military grade certification so that nobody can get your valuable secrets out of Key Vault. And there are strategies how you can securely access this Key Vault from your .NET applications. It's just 3 or 4 lines of code and it just works. So this is a very secure way of storing your settings in the cloud. Typically you don't have such Key Vaults with hardware encryption in your local area network. Well, it is possible. For instance, there are hardware protected Key Vaults available, for instance, as heads for, I think, for Raspberry Pi, for instance. It just costs you a bunch of dollars, and then you can install such a Key Vault physically in your data center or at home, for instance. That's also possible. But it is a little bit of, let's say, yeah, development work that you don't need. So, what is the important thing? And this I might ask you in any oral exam. Is it a good idea to save secrets in a configuration file that you check in? No, it is not. Possible strategies against it: don't use production credentials but local credentials like localhost. Use environment variables. Use parameters as startup. Use a vault like Key Vault. Yeah?
Couldn't you also just save it in another file, maybe not, it's not working that good?
Absolutely. No, it works perfectly fine in C#, because if we take a look, I think I added the, let me quickly go here. I want to open another browser here. You have a good idea. In Visual Studio, if you take a look at the configuration stuff here, then there is a separate, here, security, a separate way. It's this one, save storage of app secrets. What you can do is you can use the Secret Manager tool. And what the Secret Manager tool does, it stores secrets outside of the directory where your code lives. It stores the secrets in a directory in your user account's profile. So if you have a laptop with an encrypted disk, for instance BitLocker, that's easy to do on your laptop, then you can safely store secrets there because you will never check in this directory. It's not part of your code directory. But still, if you run ASP.NET, it will automatically take a look in these files and it will show you the settings just if they were in your normal app settings JSON file. So your idea, by not storing these settings locally but somewhere else, Microsoft had the same idea and they implemented it with this Secret Manager. So that's another good strategy that you can do. Good. Nice. So, we talked about settings. What is relevant for the exam? You definitely need to understand that you have a constructor with I configuration, and you need to know how to read config settings like that. Good. New topic. Logging. What do I mean with logging? You have probably already written some log files in the past. If you write an application and you want to know what's going on, you're writing something to the log file, right? You can do that, of course. The problem with log files is that in the cloud, you typically maintain servers differently. Did I already tell you about the pets and cattle principle in the cloud servers, something like this? And let me quickly describe what is meant with that. I will draw just here on my laptop so we have it on the video. In the past, let's go back 10 years, 15 years, something like this, you typically had a single server, something like this, and you treated the server like a pet, German Haustier. I have 2 pets. I have 2 cats, Lissy and Holly, and when they sneeze, we immediately run to the vet because we love them, and we got them when they were tiny little cats, and we will keep them until they are 20 or more, or I don't know. We treat them like our servers. We love our servers. We install them, we feed them, we install patches, we know their problems, we install a virus scanner, and whatever we do, just like a pet, and we keep them for years. This is what we typically do, and this is how the world looked like a few years ago. Today, in the cloud, if we are talking about cloud computing, things work completely different. Typically, you don't have pets, but you have cattle. Cattle is das Vieh, okay? A farmer. A farmer doesn't have 2 cows. A larger farmer has maybe 1,000 cows. Of course, he loves every cow, but still, the relationship with each cow is kind of different. So the same is true in the cloud. You don't have a single server with, 16 cores and huge memory, but you have a lot of servers, something like this and this and this, and they are working behind a load balancer, and when requests come in, these requests are distributed on your server farm. In the cloud, that's the default. That's nothing special, it's just there. Every one of these servers is really small. And what's happening is that these servers sometimes die. For instance, the 3rd server, this server needs an update. Do you think somebody connects to this server and installs an update? No, this server is just killed and we get a new one. Do you think the 1st server gets an update? No, we just kill it and we get a new one. Just like with the cows at the farm. I'm a vegetarian, so for me that's not good. But there are people who love to eat schnitzel. And therefore, cows have to come from somewhere, and this is the same as with your servers. Now, if you have a log file here, then everything is fine. Because if you want to know what's going on in my server, you have exactly 1 server, you have exactly 1 log file, you take a look at the log file, and all is good. But imagine that you write for every server a single log file, and then a customer calls you and says, hey, I have a problem, Rainer. And then you would like to take a look at this log file, but it's not there anymore because the server is gone. It's not there. How can you take a look at this log file? So logging has to look differently. What we have to do is we have to install a central logging server where all these servers log their data to. It's a central logging mechanism in order to long-term archive our log files so we can take a look if a customer calls us and says, yesterday I had a problem. Get the idea? So a completely different strategy for logging today as it was yesterday. And the good news is that ASP.NET makes it super simple for you to do logging like that. Essentially, you as a programmer, you just write log statements and you simply don't care where your log is stored. That can be configured independent of your code. So let's take a look how we can get the log system of ASP.NET Core. First, important information by default, and you see it here. Oops. By default, if you start an ASP.NET Core app, something like this, logs are written to standard out. So once the web server gets up, this is logging. See? This is logging that was automatically done by ASP.NET Core. It's automatically written to standard out. And in real-world cloud environments, every one of these small little servers, they have a small little daemon running on this server which collects the standard output and sends it to a so-called log aggregator. So every log message from standard out is automatically transferred to a central logging server. But still, standard out is by default. So if we want to print something, we have to do it in the following way. Please add another parameter to the constructor. And we call it iLogger of spell check controller. Logger. It's always the same. It's always this iLogger thing, and then as type parameter, the name of your class. We have to save the logger locally. So private read-only iLogger of spell check controller. By the way, I'm not sure if you know that. If I have to type a long name like spell check controller, I can save me a lot of time by just using the uppercase letters of the name. So what I do, I just type SCC, and if you take a close look, then you will see that, I can't zoom in here, I hope you still can see it, SCC, then Visual Studio will look for every type that has an uppercase S, uppercase C, and uppercase C in it. So I just here type enter, and it's gone. Just a small little production tool. This.logger equals logger. Got it? Now that we have the logger, we can easily use it. For instance, let's say we would like to add a logging information whenever we find a word that we don't know. Because maybe afterwards a human being will take a look at the log and will add all words that we don't know, for instance. Good. And this is done like that. You just add logger.log. For instance, let's log a warning. Found unknown word, and then you can do something like this, word. The important message here is you as a developer, you don't care which kind of logging you have. ASP.NET Core enables later on you to configure whether you want to have a local log file in a simple scenario, or a log aggregator, or application insights, or Elasticstack, or whatever you want to have for logging. Or I see a lot of Dynatrace stickers on your laptops. Maybe you want to use Dynatrace. Then you can send your logs to Dynatrace, for instance. Good. So let's run this application and take a look whether our logging works. I will start it in the debugger, and hopefully we will see the logs. I will put my command line on the left-hand side, and I will put my browser on the right-hand side. Oh, this browser. Good. And then we are going to say spell check the quick brown fox and so on. And if I hit enter, we should see on the left-hand side in a second not really. Let me try again. Yeah, I was too early. Now you see here, warn, simple spell checker found unknown word, quick, brown, and over. This is good. Difficult? No, isn't difficult, I think so. That's the good thing. So remember, constructor, iLogger, save it locally, and then whenever you need to write the log message, use logger.log warning. Good. That's it. That's all you have to do. Of course, this thing knows a lot of additional tricks. For instance, we can do a little bit of exception handling. Let me add 2 lines of code, and then we discuss this code. I'm not sure if you know all the C# constructs that I'm going to use here. Catch, file not found, exception, file not found, exception, I'm missing a using probably. Let's see, yes, system.io. And then we can, for instance, say logger.log error, log criticals. It's an evil critical error here. And we can pass in the exception, and we can say dictionary not found, and rethrow it. Do you understand what this means, this try catch? Do you know that from Java? Can you remember it from last year, TypeScript? It worked everywhere the same. Any questions? Clear? Okay, good. Okay, the dictionary content, we need this variable outside. So let's say string dictionary content and remove that one. So I will zoom in. If you want to follow along, you have to add these 1, 2, 3, 4 statements. I don't fully trust you. Do you really know what this throw statement means? What does it mean?
It throws the exception so that it can be caught by another.
Okay. I underestimated you. Yes, that's perfectly right. It rethrows the exception so that somebody else in a higher level in your call stack can catch this exception again. I fully agree. Good. Good, good. So you don't need to do the example that I do now. I'm consciously screwing up now, so I'm just adding an exclamation mark to the file name. Of course, this will not work. We know that it will not work, but hopefully we will see that the exception is thrown. So we want to say spell check sentence and so on. Where is it? Here is it. Let's press enter, and hopefully in a few seconds we should see something. Not really. Why not? 5. Now it is here. And boom. That is exactly what I wanted to show you. See that one? Could not find file. This is the error, and the fact that we have a fail here comes from our logging infrastructure. Good? Understand that? Nice. Now I would like to show you in the last few minutes, I think we have 10 minutes left, right? I think so. I would like to show you a more practical example. It's not a real-world heavyweight logging, but it kind of gives you hopefully an idea of how this logging stuff works. It's up to you whether you want to follow along. You can also just take a look at it. It's not complicated what I'm going to do. I would like to use a system which is called SEC. It's a log aggregator, this one. It's a very nice tool. I've installed it locally. It gathers some logging information and gives you a nice little user interface where you see all the log statements, where you see it here, where you can do filtering, and you see a nice timeline, when do I have which errors, warnings, and so on. And you can build really nice dashboards where you see whether you have some problems, and so on and so on. This tool is free for a single user mode. So I installed it locally. Looks like this. It's linked in my slides. So if you want to really try that on your laptop, you have to install SEC from here. I have the download here. You don't need to do it now because we just have 10 minutes, and don't worry, in the afternoon lesson you will get a homework and there you can try it on your own. It will be part of, you can earn, in fact, an extra point by adding sec to your application in the afternoon, okay? So, good. If I want to add sec, I could now forget about the ASP.NET logging and add a special API of sec, but that's not the point. What we want to have is we want to have a kind of framework that does this for us. And a good combination for sec is Serilog. Serilog is a framework that is pretty popular when it comes to logging in ASP.NET Core apps. Serilog takes your log statements and then it has a lot of so-called sinks, Serilog sinks. Here we have it. Everything is linked in my slide deck, so you don't need to remember that. So you see a lot of systems that you can send your log to. So whatever you use for logging, if you install Serilog, you can later say, okay, let's write it into a Postgres database, in a SQL Server database, in a file, in Azure Application Insights, or wherever you want to send it to. That's the nice thing. So let's quickly add this to our application. 3 simple steps. First step, we need to add a NuGet package. Do you already know what a NuGet package is? The other class didn't really, so we have to talk about it, but not now. This will be something for the C# lesson. For now, NuGet is similar to NPM. What NPM was for Node, NuGet is for C#. So, browse, and let's look for Serilog ASP.NET Core. Here it is, Serilog ASP.NET Core. Click on it, install it, done. Now you have to read through all these license agreements, whether you are okay with the license provider. Now, of course, we are. It's a good and established open source product. Take a look, 10.3 million downloads, that's pretty good. So the next one is we need a sink for sec. Serilog sinks sec. Here it is. Install it. Okay. Accept. Now the system will install a bunch of stuff. By the way, just for your interest, if I click on the project, you see the 2 packages that we just installed are now part of the CS_proj file. Good. We have to change a little bit in our program.cs. And fortunately, the sec and Serilog stuff is pretty well documented. So we can just follow the guidelines. Here you go, follow the link, this link here, if you want to follow along. But you can also just take a look what I do, this link. And then you see, this is the new main function. Currently, we only have this line, create blah.build.run. This one, create blah.build.run. So what I do, I copy all the stuff above and put it in front. And then I copy all the stuff below and put it afterwards. Then I need a little bit of usings. The light bulb is very handy here. And another using. The light bulb is very handy here. And this one is returning a number. So let's change the return value. Looks good. But we need to do create host builder. Good. So, I copied one line too much. Now I'm happy with it. Last but not least, if we follow the guidelines through, we need to add one additional statement. Use Serilog. Good. Let's do that. Here, use Serilog. That's done. Now we write all our logs to Serilog. And now we can configure where we would like to put our logs to. And in my case, I would like to send it to sec. See that one? That is the second link. And in the second link, all I have to do is I have to copy a single line right to sec. So go back, And up here, where we have write to console, we now say write to sec. That's it. And that's the beauty of this Serilog stuff. You don't have to change a single line of code in your implementation. All you do is a little bit of configuration code at the beginning, and with that you are very flexible and you can send the logs to wherever you want. Good, I will try that. Let's hit simple spell checker. Currently my program is still broken. I have the exclamation mark with the dictionary file name, so probably we'll get an error, hopefully. So if I put sec here on the left-hand side, and we enable auto refresh mode, and the first is from, yeah, let's do it like that. Put that on the left. Come on. Something like this. Good. And then say spell check. Here it is. Spell check and let it run. And boom, we get an exception. See? On the left-hand side, we automatically get the exception. And here I can now click on it and I see all the details. You see that one? And now I can also look for it. I can, for instance, look for dictionary. Let's take a look. Aha, you see, immediately I find what I was looking for. I can, bless you, I can do a full text search, and now I have a really nice thing. And this sec stuff is currently now running in personal mode, so just for me on my computer. But it has a different mode where you can install it centrally in your data center, and then you can have many, many servers send their logs, stream their logs to this central system, and with that you have a kind of status console where you can easily have an overview about the health status of all your servers. You get the idea? So what do you have to remember as a kind of recap at the end? For the exam, it's important that you understand that you need this iLogger stuff and that you can use this logger.log warning or logger.log critical. In the afternoon, you will get a homework where you can practice that. It will be a homework for the next 2 days, so a perfect preparation for the upcoming exam. The whole sec stuff and Serilog stuff, it is for your interest. It would be too complicated and too large for the exam. So you will not have to do that in the exam, but you will have to do it in the homework. Okay? Any questions regarding configuration or logging? My goal was that in the first hour we recap some basic principles of ASP.NET Core APIs. So therefore we built one together. And then we added configuration, we discussed why, and we added logging, and we discussed why this is important and how it has changed. Good? Nice. See you in the afternoon.